I know it's an informational hearing, but I would not be opposed if it got passed into law, because I think it's a very fine effort that we're bringing forward here with Senate File 3380, which is a bill that, as you said, that allows people to receive services from a home, who are receiving services from a home care provider or housing with services established, the right to install or operate an electronic monitoring device to broadcast or record care or services given to the resident. And Madam Chair and members, that's what this is for, meant not for nursing homes, but for institutions that have caregiving, like assisted living, memory care units, whatever it might be, that elderly people are renting a home from these people. And this is really a resident's right to bill, not really an institutional issue, because these people are living in their homes there. So we define, the definitions are there, and I don't know if council would like to briefly go through very quickly the bill, if that's necessary, Madam Chair.
Yes, would the committee like to have, we can walk through the bill very quickly, please.
Just very quickly, because it's
Mr. Monahan.
Madam Chair, members, Section 1 of the bill provides definitions of home care provider, housing with services establishments, really by cross-reference to existing definitions, legal representative, also by cross-reference to existing definitions, and restricts the residents that the bill concerns to those who are either residing in a housing with services establishment or anyone receiving home care services, which may be in their own home. Subdivision 2 of Section 1 has general requirements that a residential care or service provider must allow the resident to install and operate the monitoring device in their private home, room, or unit of the residence. Subdivision 3 contains some resident protections. Paragraph A states that a provider must not refuse to provide care or change the terms of the care if someone uses such a camera. And paragraph B states that a provider cannot require a resident or service recipient to install a camera. Subdivision 4 talks about the cost and who's responsible for paying, and states that the resident or service recipient is responsible for all the costs associated with the camera, but that in a housing with services establishment, the establishment must make a reasonable attempt to accommodate the use of the camera. Subdivision 5 provides that a provider may not access any video or audio recordings. In other words, the recordings are the property of the resident or service recipient. Subdivision 6 provides that the video or audio recordings may be admitted as evidence in a civil, criminal, or administrative proceeding. Subdivision 7 provides that this act would be governed by the Health Enforcement Consolidation Act. And Subdivision 8 creates crimes related to interfering with the camera, and also establishes crimes if the reason one interferes with the camera is to cover up another crime.
Thank you very much. Senator, there's a delete all amendment for this bill. Did you want us to take an action on that, or just you would like that action?
I would really like that, yes, please.
Okay, so the A1 delete all amendment is offered by Senator Marty. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Okay, thank you. Please continue with your testimony.
And Madam Chair and members, people have asked me why I'm bringing this bill forward now, and I have with me today our county attorney, Anoka County Attorney Tony Palumbo, who has been working on elder victims abused, exploited, and alone for a number of years. Also, I have Jean Peters, whose mother was in the article that you read. His mother was one of the people that was abused in the nursing home that she was living in, or institution she was living in.
Thank you, Senator. Excuse me. I would just note that the article is among the materials that we have at our
Yes.
desk.
Okay. And then I said, part of the reason is because I think it's why I'm doing this is because of my age. You know, I've told you before that I'm 75. You all know it, so I don't need to try to hide it. But when you get to be this age, 75, and Richard, my husband, is 85, you know, all of our friends, many of them are passed on already. Many of them are in nursing homes, and we do a lot of visiting at those nursing homes. And I have a brother who is, in fact, we're having his funeral on Saturday because he died in a nursing home out of state. My older brother, who's 87, is in a nursing home in St. Cloud area. My good friend Helen is in Camellia Rose nursing home. Now, every one of us want our loved ones to be treated in a kind, quality manner so that their lives will be as comfortable and as happy as they can possibly be. And so it's when I'm experiencing this and seeing things, small things and big things, but I'll mention the small things, like maybe they don't have their glasses on and they don't know where they are. So, you know, somebody has to help them. And I see that happening. Sometimes not their hearing aids. Sometimes it looks as if their teeth haven't been brushed when they can't do it. And it's very, 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 very sad. So when we started this bill, we thought doing it in nursing homes would be good. But then we decided it would be better to work with assisted living and other institutions that provide care, because these people, as I said, are renting their homes and they have a right to put in a camera. My good friend Michelle, who took care of her own husband for almost 10 years because I don't even recall if it was Parkinson's or whatever he had. She, in her home, but had cameras all over the house because they had 24-hour care, and in order to be sure. And she said she had fired a couple that were not treating her husband the way she wanted him to be treated. So that's why I'm doing this, and because this is my memory for my brother Joe, and I hope it'll be a memory for Jean Peters' mother, Jackie, that we have tried to do something that affects things. But I'd like to then just turn it over to County Attorney Palumbo to talk about why he went so far as to do this, and he and other people, if we could start that way.
All right, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Palumbo, to the committee, and please begin.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Tony Palumbo, P-A-L-U-M-B-O. I'm the Anoka County Attorney, and I was asked by Senator Johnson to appear before this committee this morning simply to testify a little bit about the program that we have started in Anoka County, taken in statewide. It's called Stop Abuse and Financial Exploitation. It's called the SAVE program. As an assistant county attorney, I certainly came across many, many instances where we would see financial exploitation or abuse of elders, and I got elected in 2010 and decided to do something about it as county attorney. 2012, worked with members of fellow county attorneys as well as members of the private sector, produced this video. It is now currently being shown on Twin Cities Public Television once a quarter, which describes exactly the problem of elder abuse here in our community. Very briefly, elder abuse is obviously the intentional or negligent act which causes harm to an older adult. The victims are often on a continuum from being very lucid to late stages of dementia. We are finding that essentially 2/3 of the abusers are family members, trusted individuals, or caregivers. Those are their stats. The National Center for Elder Abuse indicates there are between 1 and 2 million victims of elder abuse each year in America. And the National Institute of Justice says that 1 in 10 people over the age of 60 will be abused sometime in their later years. And if you have dementia, that number drops to 1 in 5. So the financial exploitation of elders, of course, estimates are between 3 and 19 billion a year by both trusted and by strangers. By the year 2030, people over 65 will have doubled in Minnesota in population to 19%, so that is 1 in 5. And I guess as legislators, you might want to take that into account when you're talking about 20% of the population. Now it exceeds 65%. The Alzheimer's Association indicates that Minnesota today has 89,000 people with various forms of dementia or Alzheimer's. And that number is expected to increase by 35% in the next 10 years. Think about that. I mean, Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, but when you take that into account into our aging population with the advances in medical care, people living longer, having had more money than they've ever had previously in their life, they're able to maintain themselves in a somewhat of a independent living type situation as long as possible. But we are seeing as a result of that some of the crimes that are now coming to our attention. There are various kinds of neglect or abuse, physical. There's neglect, there's emotional, there's psychological. Believe it or not, we've even had sexual abuse of elders. And it starts with isolation. That is one of the key factors we look at in terms of people are being abused. Are they being isolated by their caregiver? That is a very key component to what's going on. There are, of course, many physical signs, including bruising, et cetera, and their behavioral signs, withdrawal. People do not attend their normal activities, what they usually do as a result of being abused. There are 3 questions that we ask. That when I go out and I talk to the communities, the 3 questions that I tell them, if you want to be somebody's best friend, ask them the following 3 questions. 1, is someone taking your money without your permission? Number 2, are you afraid of anyone? Or 3, is anyone hurting you? And if they give you an answer, or sometimes even a non-answer by just the way they don't answer, that will tell you exactly what's going on in their lives. We now, as prosecutors, depend on verbal disclosure or obviously witnesses to come forward. Any sort of video certainly would help our job in prosecuting certainly those offenders who are committing what I consider to be some of the gravest acts against our most vulnerable. Obviously, the details of how that can be worked out, but as a prosecutor, I certainly would want to have information to be able to prosecute as fully as I can in this situation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Jean Peters is our next testifier.
Yes, we have a video that we'd like to show, or I think it's ready to go. It's about 3 minutes.
Okay.
And then Jean will speak.
We'll get that up and running. We have a floor session coming up, so just,
Right.
I know that sometimes when testifiers aren't accustomed to coming here, they're not aware of how quickly this time goes, so.
Madam Chair, I have really tried to coach my
Good,
witnesses.
thank you, thank you.
To be very brief. And I've tried to control myself, too. Is that part of it?
No, that's an ad.
Oh. If it doesn't work, we'll just go ahead with it if you, without it.
They can ask me questions while we wait.
Abuse caught on hidden cameras, or what some call granny cams, has led to arrests and charges at 2 Twin Cities area nursing homes. In another case, 2 sisters caught verbal abuse and neglect of their frail 85-year-old mother on camera at a senior home in Edina.
You're really frustrated, you know that? That's why I'm rough, because you don't listen. People come back, you didn't hear anything. Because you don't listen, you don't do it by yourself, and you don't want to listen to me, so I gotta be forceful with you because you don't want to do it, ever. You just stand around and you try to get out of everything like a child. You're not a child, you're a grown-ass adult. A grown-ass adult.
We were very upset. We were like, what do we do? Now what do we do? Because she was being yelled at. She was called a grown-ass adult 3 times.
Ms. Peters,
Identify yourself.
Yes, I'm Madam Chair.
can you pull that microphone right
Madam
up to
Chair.
you? Thank you.
Committee, thank you for having me here today. I, along with my sister, feel very privileged to be able to speak on this subject. I'm Jean Peters. Jackie Horrigan, who was in the video, was my mother, the mother of 7 children. And she, along with my father, were like many people of, as Tom Brokaw says, the greatest generation. My dad was a World War II veteran. They worked very hard within their community volunteering. My dad worked 2 jobs. He scrimped and saved. We weren't really denied anything, but we really didn't have much. Our family vacation was with 7 kids, all of us piled into a station wagon and going to one of our parks and camping. I'm not sure whether that was a vacation for my mother or not. As these assisted living, private pay assisted living communities continue to grow, I would really like everyone to know that these are apartments that are rented, not easily. Often there's a waiting list for them. And my mom found that this community she was in, York Gardens, was very comfortable. She thought she just was amazed at how beautiful it was. We decided to install the camera after about 4 months of working with the staff, the aides, the nurses, the executive director. And my mom would say things like, "I've been bad today. My arms are sore. I'm hungry." We couldn't quite figure it out. And after getting messages from the administration saying, well, this is what it is, I couldn't not listen to my mom, which is very difficult if someone has some form of dementia. You're not quite sure whether the words, "There's a man that sleeps in my chair every morning for a couple hours," is true or not. So I bought a camera and sat on it for a month because I was afraid of retaliation, afraid that the facility wouldn't like me, wouldn't see me as a help. And I was a help. I'm a nurse practitioner. We never expected that within the first 3 days of installing that camera, that we would learn that my mom hadn't had her hands washed or her teeth brushed. Now think about that in a community of elders. She wasn't taken down to her meals. She wasn't taken to activities. And the video that you just saw, that was on the 3rd day. And the reason why my mom was a little resistant about getting out of bed is because she was put to bed at 6:30 the night before, where she had missed breakfast. They didn't get her up for breakfast. And this was now lunchtime, and they'd given her medication to lower her blood sugars. Our family truly believes that it is the family's right, the individual's right, to install a camera in these rented apartments without fear of retaliation from the landlords that are managing the rental units. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very personal testimony. Would you like us to continue, Senator, with the other testifiers?
I would like to ask Cheryl, if you will allow it, Cheryl Hannon, who is a state long-term care ombudsman, and I would hope that you would stay in case there are questions for.
I will, but I'll get
Okay.
on my seat.
I had a visit with Ms. Hennon, and she had told me today that she would like to make some comments.
Okay, welcome. Please introduce yourself, but I must say that there are others who've signed up here, Senator, to
No, I don't
speak,
have
and no, we have others who have
Yeah,
asked to speak,
okay.
so we need to keep
moving.
respect for those who did sign up, and I would ask that that you keep your comments very direct and to the point. Then we'll be followed by Sheila Van Pelt, Doug Beardsley, and Carrie Thurlow, and we will have, just a little less than 8 minutes here to go through all of that. So please keep that in mind. Anytime we take from others shortens their ability to communicate with us.
Senator Sharon, committee members, my name is Cheryl Hennon, and I'm the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and I promise you I will keep this short. We are the voice of the consumers. We represent many individuals who live in nursing homes and assisted living housing with services. I do appreciate the fact that Senator Johnson is bringing focus to this issue. Since 2000, at least a dozen states have considered some type of law or regulation allowing cameras in nursing home and other licensed residential living settings for adults to help detect and deter abuse and neglect. As advocates for consumers in the state of Minnesota, we have concerns that any legislation honor federal and state resident and tenant rights, and I believe after reading the proposed legislation, this legislation does accomplish that. We've heard from a family member, very compelling story. It's sad to hear that that happens. And I believe we need to examine the broader issue. The prevalence of reported abuse is a matter of serious concern. To assure safety in long-term care settings, I believe it means the coming together of expertise, including government agencies, consumers, family members, provider organizations, and other elder advocates to address the root causes of this problem. I support and am willing to participate in any collaborative efforts that move forward from this point on to ensure that the right legislation is in place and that we have adequate enforcement in place. I want to close with, again, I appreciate the Senator's work to bring focus to protecting vulnerable members of our society so that they may live a quality life and receive quality care. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Let's see, Ms. Van Pelt, if you come forward, and then Doug Beardsley, who is the Vice President of Member Relations Care Providers Minnesota, please come forward if you're here and be prepared to testify because our time, Ms. Van Pelt, please come and begin your testimony. Please come forward and sit at the table and be prepared to start your testimony. I'm not seeing Mr. Beardsley. Okay, thank you. Please come forward.
Hi, Madam Chair. My name is Sheila Van Pelt. Members of the committee, thank you for having me here. I've written to each of every one of you over the weekend. The area that we're discussing is completely in my wheelhouse. I've had the 2 concurrent investigations, many of you know, with the Minnesota Department of Health for an HMO investigation and an Office of Health Facility Complaints investigation. So as we're speaking about this, you can look back to a communication I have had with Deb Holtz, our former long-term care ombudsman. She and I were on friendly terms for a number of years. She knew at great length the issues going on with my particular case. At that point in time, and you can see in one of the communications, we talked about granny cams. I did everything right with the care of my mother, and then I looked back and thought I didn't do enough, and believe me, I did everything right. I thought I should have videotaped, I did a hell of a good job emailing, documenting, and that's probably why you guys see me do as much in emails, because people want to not take me at my word. They don't necessarily want to believe the complainants, but we need our voice heard, listened, and respected as credible sources of data. So when I said I probably didn't do enough, there is a fine line for every one of us. Do we say too much to alert that we question and wonder what's going on, that people will take notice of you? Now, as I sit here today, Attorney Colombo, we met when I was at William Mitchell College of Law for the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. I have been also working with financial elder abuse issues. I'm acquainted with Iris Freeman through Representative Hillstrom to see what we can do in language on things. I brought the SAFE video and everything to my church. I had Iris Freeman come to our church to bring awareness to it. He came to the city of Plymouth to bring awareness to it. So what I am doing, I'm an advocate on so many levels that you probably don't even know about. But what I want to say to you and what it hits home, one of the alleged institutions that was found with harm was St. Teresa New Hope. I am a volunteer there to this day for 5 years. The only time I haven't been there is when I was recovering from surgery. I go there every Friday, serve happy hour to the residents. My mom came to live there after she had an interesting incident the place before. I would bring my mother back there again. But I serve happy hour to the residents, and I give manicures into the evening. What I will tell you, when that incident first was reported about St. Teresa, I went up to Barb Brody, who I consider someone I have so much respect for as the administrator of that facility. But what I told her at that point in time when that article came out, there is even someone providing care, a nurse's aide, that I thought was very harsh with residents, and I brought it to her attention, saying I wouldn't feel right if I didn't tell you about this, given what I know has gone on in this facility. So I'm putting it out there. I love being there. People there do a great job, but we have to be aware, because I have had my experiences that I will not shut up about. If it happened to my mom when I was taking such good care of her, these people who are before you, it's happening everywhere, but who's going to take the time to talk about it? And what I have said to the Minnesota Department of Health, because I've had these 2 concurrent investigations, the facility administrator won't say in my particular case where he told the truth to the Minnesota Department of Health, and he hires a medical malpractice defense law firm. So does the HMO. And I have been retaliated by the HMO at the tune of $8,000 a day because I was having them investigated. I've had other medical records changed. I have brought this to the state. And then you have a facility where I wanted to buy medical records that I have the right to pay $1 something a page. And I'm not getting them. I can't even buy them. I'm retaliated and have the police come after me, which then was it was noteworthy. But what I want to say is, when you start giving red flags out there, that you are watching them, your loved one won't be enhanced in their caregiving in the most appropriate ways. And I want to go, St. Teresa, I hope they take me back. They know I love volunteering there. I'm there for the residents. But what I want to impress upon you is this. I have brought so much factual data to the Minnesota Department of Health, and I have told Chris Lorkey, who is the MDH Office of Health Facilities Administrator, or person at the head. You'll see it in an email that I gave to you, and I also emailed over the weekend. What are families going to have to keep doing? And I said this years ago, and I say it now. Are we going to have those videotapes, this, that, and the other? And now what I want to say is, inevitably, these investigations are taken, and I know I want to make it really quick.
Yeah, I really don't like to cut you off, because I think you have really important things to say, and you're talking a lot about fear of retaliation here if you do assert yourself, which is a part of what others have been saying today. So please do not take my cutting you off as any indication that what you're saying is not important. But I would ask you, because we need to be careful about time,
okay,
that you speak critically to what it is that Senator Johnson has put in front of you and how you think that particular bill affects what it is that you've witnessed and that you've been advocating for a long time.
I just think that families need to have the freedom to do what they want without knowing what people are knowing they're doing, if we want to get authentic information of what is really going on. And I lastly want to close up with this. What if there are videos done and they aren't put out there, and the family wants the Minnesota Department of Health to do an investigation and they have no access about the video? When is the family's voice going to be viewed as credible? Because right now, I have been asking, and I've been saying to Chris Sears from the Star Tribune, what do the medical records state about these events? Do you think the abuse is going to be noted in the medical records? And then when when the facility is being investigated, what are they going to say about it? And so even in the St. Teresa New Hope one, you'll see in the medical records or what have you, it doesn't say anything about it. And even the people who were proven to have no information or have not done anything did. And it's not in the records.
Thank you. That's another subject that we have to address in terms of when you have video, if you have this video proof and it's not in the records, what does that mean, and what is the response the Department of Health makes to that in terms of the licensing of that facility? So thank you. Thank you. Please introduce yourselves and begin your testimony.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, with your permission, Mr. Beardsley and I are sharing our time, so in the interest of time, if you don't mind if I begin.
Please
I know that's
begin.
out of order on the agenda. For the record, my name is Carrie Thurlow. I'm the Senior Vice President of Advocacy at Leading Age, and I'm also here on behalf of the Long-Term Care Imperative. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the important issues raised by this bill, and want to thank Senator Johnson for bringing this forward. At the outset, I need to say that unequivocally, abuse, neglect, financial exploitation of seniors is absolutely intolerable. And our members and providers throughout the state of Minnesota work very hard to prevent these events and stand committed to do so. We know that the use of hidden electronic monitoring systems is becoming increasingly more common in senior care settings, and in many respects, our state law has not kept up. And I also need to say here that contrary to some news reports, our provider organizations are not opposed to updating the law that in this area, but it is a multifaceted issue that we need to look at very carefully. One issue that we'd like the committee to consider is overt monitoring versus covert monitoring. If the intent really is to prevent abuse, it may be especially helpful to consider uses of overt monitoring in situations to absolutely prevent. It is absolutely the time is right to have a policy discussion on these issues. Many have already referenced the age wave that is coming, our aging society, and the new technologies that are out there. But if we decide to go down this path and update our law, there are a host of issues in addition to the right to monitoring that need to be addressed that, quite frankly, the Delete Everything Amendment is silent on. For example, which settings should this apply to? Right now, the Delete All Amendment applies only to housing with services settings, and because it is silent on other settings, such as nursing homes or even other rental apartments, it leaves ambiguity whether that right applies there as well. And so we really do want to make sure that there's a comprehensive approach. How is consent of the resident and the roommate determined? There's been a lot of discussion about the rights to families, and indeed that's an important component. But at the heart of this is the right to consent of residents and roommates. And we need to carefully consider when an individual has a right to decide when they're being surveilled. Even if there is a formal decision-making arrangement, such as a power of attorney or a healthcare directive or a guardianship, oftentimes those arrangements are silent on the issue of being recorded in their most intimate settings. And so we need to make sure that whatever we do in this area has explicit consent whenever possible. Should there be signage requirements or notice if monitoring is occurring, whether it's overt or covert? Should a resident be able to provide limitations when that monitoring is done? Again, reminding you that footage that we're talking about is being done in the most intimate of settings. Can a resident restrict the time that footage is being taken care of? And what about that roommate as well? For example, if there are heightened areas of privacy when the resident might be having a visit with clergy or with family members or even with their attorneys or other intimate care arrangements, those issues need to be addressed. The custody of recordings has been raised, and I think that indeed that this is an area that we need to look at. There may be very important reasons when providers should have access to the footage. For example, if they need to act to terminate employment, if they need to investigate an alleged abuse because they are mandated reporters. And we need to really be really intentional about that as well. And then the last thing that I would say is making sure that there are adequate documentation timestamps, for example, making sure that it is unaltered in situations where there might be additional investigations or lawsuits. Again, we want to thank Senator Johnson for bringing this bill forward. It, in fact, raises very important issues and that need to be addressed in a multifaceted way. And we would say that the bill as introduced probably is a better step to starting point to address those issues than the Delete Everything Amendment, but we stand committed to working with the senator on these issues.
Mr. Beardsley, we are under call. We are under call, so the senators are going to have to be leaving here. I just want you to know that.
Okay. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Doug Beardsley, and I'm the Vice President of Member Services at Care Providers of Minnesota. Like Carrie, I'm speaking on behalf of the Long-Term Care Imperative also. We believe the use of remote electronic monitoring for persons receiving care is already a common practice and likely to grow. Given the many important privacy, consent, regulatory, and operational issues involved in this issue, The long-term care imperative is committed to working with a multi-stakeholder group to develop a proposal that will attempt to address the concerns of stakeholders while permitting the authorized use of remote electronic monitoring in various care settings. Minnesota has a rich history of bringing together stakeholders on initiatives to prevent and address elder abuse over the past decades, including the creation of the Minnesota Vulnerable Adults Act, collaboration on training, bolstering the financial exploitation laws of the state, passage of the felony neglect laws in Minnesota, and establishment of a statewide common reporting system for suspected incidents of maltreatment. Our broad stakeholder community has demonstrated that it can reach consensus on appropriate ways to move forward while balancing the interests of residents, roommates, family members, and caregivers. The long-term care imperative stands committed to continuing to address these issues and has already contacted both the Office of Ombudsman for Long-Term Care and the Minnesota Elder Justice Center to help coordinate such efforts and look forward to future meetings and discussions in preparation for next session. With
Thank
that,
you.
we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We really are out of time. I'm sorry that we can't have more time for conversation. This is really not a hearing per se. Senator Johnson made it clear that it was really introducing something that we know is not likely to move forward in the session because it's after deadlines. But we really wanted to honor what we think is an important initiative. Glad to hear that the care providers are going to partner with us to achieve the goal, which is to protect the client, not necessarily the employees. And that's the primary thing that I'm urging this committee to pay attention to, that it's about the clients, not the employees, who may seek some protections, but not at the expense of being held accountable for the care that our elders expect to receive. So with that, as you can see, we're peeling off. So we are going to take a quick motion on the bill that it be set aside. I guess we're just going to set this aside. Therefore, I'm sorry that we're having such a loose leaving of this meeting, but we're under call, Senator. So we will be looking forward to this conversation next session.
One sentence, if I might, Senator
Yes, Senator.
Sharon, and that is to say that I will be looking, if this doesn't pass and get into law this year, that I'm looking for someone who might be willing to carry on this measure, because I think it is an absolute necessity for us, and I don't think we should think about how difficult it is, but rather how soon we can get things taken care of.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. You know that these questions about privacy and when and what and all of that, it goes through judiciary and will be combed over a lot. But in that, I hope that those of us who are not here remind those who are here that it's about getting this in place for the protection of vulnerable seniors. Just to inform the committee who's abandoned us here and other members, we're going to try to have one more hearing before the session is over that relates to an update on what's happening under the Freedom to Breathe Act and in the area of tobacco utilization. So we will probably gather again. Otherwise, I would be giving a lot of thank yous this morning to people who've been supporting our committee. With that, we're adjourned.